All right. Also, welcome everybody. My name is Sofia and my teammate Anne-Marie. We're here to present intuitive eating, and we're both four-year dietetic interns. So maybe many of you have heard of intuitive eating. It's been going around in the media for a long time. And so we will present the history and how it all started and what it is. Then we will go do a little review of the 10 principles, then some general benefits. And at the end, we're going to have popular comments and misconceptions section, which is normal question that I always ask around in this concept. And at the end, a little conclusion. And we will like for you to keep your question until the end. So the history and origin. So the term intuitive eating was only appeared in the 1995 book by Evelyn Tribble and Elise Retch, who are both registered dietitian in the United States. They have continued to make some changes and they published their last edition 2 years ago. So this book was first started because they started to noticing how the clients were always stuck in the same cycle of diets that meant they will lose their weight during the diet and they would just gain back this weight all over again. So they believed that it was important to take away the priority that the weight on the scale as a number is always in our life and just replacing it by other factors of well-being that are more beneficial than just a number. They also wanted to put an important title on the things that diet is not always a good thing to do and is sometimes unhealthy because of the cycle of gaining and then losing it back. And it comes with a lot of emotional stigma and that will inflict more damage. So as I said, the term was only appeared in 1995, but there were other pioneers before them. So in 1973, Thelma Wheeler had a weight management program with the concept that diets did not work and that it was more important to change our lifestyle. And then in 1978, there was a book called Fat is a Feminine Issue, which talk about the woman's experience and how they have always the preoccupation of losing weight, avoiding certain foods as fats and carbs because they didn't want to gain weight. And then in 1982, there was Jeanine Root, who had texts about emotional eating. And in 1995, they published the first book. So what is intuitive eating? So we took the definition in their book, which is a self-care eating framework which integrates instinct, emotion, and rational thought. It honors physical and mental health and is a dynamic interaction between the mind and the body. And it's aligned with health at every size. And this is important because they notice how intentional loss weight didn't always work and it creates health problems. It could start with weight stigma and then it could go to weight cycling, and even in some unfortunate cases, it could even go to eating disorders. So it's important to remember that all bodies, no matter their size, deserve dignity and respect. Here is another definition by Aaron Flores, who's another registered dietitian in the United States as well. And he said that is more about trusting your inner body to make good choices that feel good to you and your body without judgment from yourself and influence from diet culture. So intuitive eating is an anti-diet approach. As we said, it doesn't focus on the numbers on the scale, but rather to make new practices and actions to promote health. It also encourages us to connect to our body cues. An example is when we were kids, we will eat because we were hungry and we will stop eating when we were full. So this encourages us to go back to those feeding cues and understand our body better. And also in the concept that you are your best expert because you know your body the best.
Okay, so now let's dive into the 10 principles of intuitive eating. Just before we go over the 10 principles, we want to let you know that even though each principle is numbered, there is no like particular order, but today we'll go through each principle, as they are ordered in the book. So here's a just quick view of the 10 principles. So the number one principle is to reject the diet mentality. But first, what's a diet mentality? We could talk about it for a long time, but in brief, it's a false belief that weight loss leads to health and happiness. And it's also the inner voice you may hear in your head, which categorizes food into good or bad and healthy or unhealthy. And it's also anything that tells you that and makes you feel like uncomfortable with your body, yourself, and your health. Okay, so here's an overview of the diet or restriction cycle, and here's what happens. Like when people feel unsatisfied with their body, they tend to set themselves rules around food, so they restrict themselves. But then they end up like being really craving for the food they don't allow themselves to have. And this feeling of deprivation will eventually lead to binging or to break their food rules. And what comes next? They feel guilt and a lot of shame. And this will eventually will lead to even like more restriction, and people will say like, oh, I'll try to do better this time, and the cycle goes on and on. So the big problem is that the more you break these rules and you don't see the results, the less you trust your body and the more you ignore and get out of touch with it. So in order to work on becoming an intuitive eater, you need to challenge yourself and reject the diet mentality mindset.
Principle number 2 is honor your hunger, and so it's important to keep your body fed with adequate energy. Also, it's important to remember that hunger is a normal signal in a biological process. It's a signal that we must not ignore. And when we signal, and when this signal is ignored, we can overeat and we'll have a lot of cravings, and then we will not be able to trust our body as normal. So for a long time, we have dishonored our bodies. We are ignoring our feeding cues. So we kind of forgot what hunger feels like because we implemented a lot of external rules, and that doesn't allow us to trust our body. It's also in the society, diet culture is always telling us that it's important to control our hunger, but it's not about control. It's not a matter of willpower. It's just a normal biological response. So it's also important to focus on your internal cues. When you are hungry, you're supposed to be a little bit dizzy. Your stomach is supposed to be gargling and you have nausea. That means you are hungry and you have to eat. So here is the hunger and fullness scale. And here we try to remember to keep on in mind that the numbers that we want to have is 3 to 7. So in a normal hungry and you're ready to eat until you're comfortable full. And if you go past that, you will extremely be uncomfortable and even have pain because you ate too much. And then when you're restricting too much, you will be painfully hungry. And it's also important to remember that we can forget the clock. We're not supposed to eat because of strict rules, but not mostly just following our internal body. If we are hungry, we eat. And here is another little analogy that explains how this is. So, for example, when something smells really bad, you will hold your breath and hold your breath until you will just pass out. But when the solution will be just to breathe. And then it goes the same thing. If you feel hungry, you're not supposed to restrict until you go to the binge system, but just go eat. And then it's the same thing when you have to go to the toilet. You don't hold it and you prefer just to go.
So the next principle is to make peace with food. So in other words, making peace with food is giving yourself permission to eat everything without having like forbidden foods. And like, in order to make this, you need to retrain your brain to think about food in a neutral way. So there's no good food or bad food. Yes, from a nutritional perspective, we can say that there is more nutrient-dense food and that there is less nutrient-dense food. But no matter what, we should never feel guilt or shame for eating any types of food. And as seen earlier, when you don't allow yourself to eat something because you think it's a bad food, it becomes much more tempting and may lead to cravings and overeating at the end. So in order to build a good relationship with food, we need to stop labeling food as healthy or unhealthy.
Principle number 4 is silence the food police. So this food police is normally the voices that we have all in our head that judge us for everything and all choices that we make. So it could be choices from the type of food we're eating because we feel that it might be too fat or too caloric, or even the times that we're eating if we feel like we're eating too much or not enough, and then amounts and whatever you have exercise or not. And then these voices can also be persons in your family or your friends that give you advice on nutritional facts when sometimes you don't need this. So it's important to remember that we have to keep these voices very far away and not take them into account and just think about what we feel and just listen to our own self. So society has normalized for a long time about this rigid rule that you're not supposed to eat too much, you're just supposed to have only vegetables, and this makes us feel very negative about ourselves. So that's why it's very important to keep these voices away.
So the next principle is to discover the satisfaction factor. So the first thing to remember is that fullness and satisfaction are not the same thing. So you can eat and be physically full, but still crave for a certain food that you really wanted to eat first. For example, if you are craving for ice cream for dessert, but you decide to go and eat a banana instead, maybe you'll feel a little bit full, but you won't feel satisfied, and you will still be thinking about that ice cream. So because you didn't get full satisfaction, you'll go later for another food, for example, yogurt and granola. But what happens next? Like you're still not satisfied. So you finally decide to go eat the ice cream, but then you feel guilty and you feel like you could feel shame. So the thing to remember from this example is that, like, if the ice cream craving had been satisfied from the beginning, this person would have been satisfied and will have eaten much less, like in total. So it's also important to remember that the more pleasurable you find your food, the more satisfaction you'll be with it. And if you don't experience pleasure, you may end up like thinking about food constantly.
So principle number 6, it goes by hand with respecting your hunger. So this one is respect your fullness. And it's important to respect all body signals and tell you when you're not hungry. So this takes practice because for a long time we have forgotten what it is to be full or to be hungry. So at the beginning, this will take a lot of patience and intention because you will need to connect with your body all over again. And it's not a matter of perfection. You will not have to be for example, if you eat too much one day, you will not have to be guilty because you failed. It's not about failing, it's just a process that takes time. And another little tip could be to pause in the middle of a meal to check with yourself and say, I'm not really hungry yet, or am I full? And then take the decision there.
So principle 7 is to cope your emotion with kindness. So As you know, food is a source of nutrients, but it can also be a source of comfort in the short term, or it can be a distraction from certain emotions. So even if you're not biologically hungry, it's very normal for food to be used for comfort when facing strong emotions. And the thing is, it's okay to eat when you feel like strong emotion, but you really need to have a larger toolbox of coping skills that you can choose from when you face these emotions, because food won't fix like any feelings of in the long term, like anxiety, stress, or other emotions. So to cope your emotion with kindness, it's also like to be more mindful when you are feeling strong emotions and while you're eating, and to think about what other activities or coping strategies might help you dealing with your emotions.
Principle 8 is respect your body. So it's about accepting our genetic blueprint, and this has been very famous in the last few years in the media, because now we're talking about all sizes and how important it is when it should be always like this. So it's important to remember that everybody has different sizes, and we have to respect it. So an analogy that is used in the book is, if you are a size 8 in shoes, you're not supposed to go and try to fit into a size 5, because it's physically impossible, and it will only make you feel upset and bad about yourself. So it's important to remember that everybody deserves respect. And here we have a little example too that says, if we can appreciate the diversity among any type of dogs, we should be able to appreciate the diversity among humans as well.
So principle number 9 is about movement. So it's important to do the exercises that you feel like doing and not the one you think you're supposed to do or you must do, because this approach is much more likely to last over time and will bring you more benefits than like if you inflict yourself to do a physical activity that you don't really enjoy. And but like, yes, it's important to exercise and being active, but the focus needs to be on the outcomes from movement that aren't related to body size or the burning calorie effect of the diet mentality, and more to focus on the outcomes such as gaining strength, feeling more energized, sleeping better, or just really enjoying the activity that you do.
And then the last principle is honor your health with gentle nutrition. So this is about making choices that feel good to you and your body, because everybody is different and everybody could be having different dislikes or likes and tolerance to certain foods. So it's about having a positive relationship with food and doing actions that promote health, and remembering that, as we said before, there's no good or bad foods, but only more nutrient based or not. And this is a process that will take a lot of time. At the beginning, a lot of people who go through in intuitive eating will say that they're eating the bad food as they labeled before, but in fact it's just because they were having a lot of strict rules for a long time, and these foods were considered as off limits. So when they go to this, they try to do, and they will just binge or eat too much of this special food until the body just feels ready to be happy with the food and feel safe and eat freely. It will just take a little bit more time. And here we're gonna have some general benefits. So a greater body appreciation and acceptance, like we said before, all bodies and sizes deserve respect. It will greater life satisfaction, and then positive emotional functioning, as my teammate said, using sport and food as some coping mechanisms is not always the best choice, so it's a good and positive a relationship.
So also, it's been shown that the people embracing intuitive eating have greater motivation to exercise. They're less likely to have disordered eating behaviors. And also, they have lower blood pressure and triglycerides.
Okay, so here is all popular comments and misconception section. So because this is an emerging concept, there's a lot of questions and opinion about this, both positive and negative. So we will answer some of these questions. So the first one comment is intuitive eating is just eating whatever you want. Actually, is giving yourself the permission to explore all types of food without having any judgment from yourself or from diet culture of anybody else. And it's also removing the term fair food, as we said before, no bad or good, and just be safe and be able to choose whatever any food that you want to eat. So one of the comments that is there is no evidence supporting intuitive eating and benefits, but actually there is. So in their site, they even have a PDF with more than 125 studies, scientifically proven, that shows all the benefits. And they have a lot of studies going back for a lot of years, and they keep coming and keeping it updated.
So another misconception is if I let myself eat whatever I want, I will eat without any control. But no, because once you have made complete peace with food, you'll be able to stop eating like naturally, because you know you will have always have access to the food that you like. It's important to mention that maybe when you first begin the healing process, you may find that you're gonna eat like more foods that you previously restricted, but this restriction like won't last for a long time. Like this, you won't like once the deprivation has healed, these foods will take a balanced place in your life. Intuitive eating is for everyone. No, it's not a one size fits all. There's a lot of things to take into consideration, like medical histories, financial backgrounds, culture, access to food, schedules, and even more. So it's not just listen to your body and like everyone can do this. Like, for example, someone with an eating disorder or metabolic disorder, they can't like just follow intuitive eating without any like concern. So it depends on the person. So in conclusion, intuitive eating is really reconnecting with your body internal cues and trusting yourself rather than focusing on the external rules. The 10 principle, it's like working through them is a dynamic process that looks different for everyone. So for some people, some principle might feel easier to do, and it's okay like this. So we really hope you did learn about intuitive eating today. Um, but the thing we want you to remember today is that there's no like a best way to eat, but like actually the best way to eat is eating a variety of foods that support our overall well-being. So it might not be intuitive eating for you, but it's important to know what's good for us. So these are go-to resources. If you're interested in learning more, there's a intuitive workbook. There's also the book we talked earlier, and there's a new book that came out. It's How to Raise Intuitive Eater. So if you have any kids and you want to raise them in becoming an intuitive eater, that's an interesting book to look for.
Thank you for everybody that attended on our, we hope you learned a lot, and then we will answer any questions that you might have.